chip from the King of Hearts, and
Well,
their idea is you get a sequence of like 3 in a row,
Although
4
Ryan
or 5 in a row,
said
depending
that
on how
we
many
had down
players.
to 3
So it's
patients
almost
on
kind of like a
You're kidding
Connect
me.
4,
Yeah.
you have to get the sequence.
Three patients.
He's
and
here right
everything,
now.
so it keeps
Yeah,
going
but he
until.
finishes.
I think
Sorry.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, I think it is.
I think it's a record.
Yeah.
My in-laws like just playing card
Yeah,
games.
breaks.
Euchre, we play a lot of euchre. We play a game called Hand and Foot. It's a game that they taught me. They're obsessed with it. Spider-Man. It's all it's like tier cards.
I mean, it's like more
And I enjoy them, but like
stressful,
sometimes I'm like,
but
can
it's
we play something else?
Like more like a Pearson or
Like LCR,
it's
stuff like
mental
that.
masturbation, man.
What
It's
is it?
so much
LCR?
more intellectual
Yeah.
than medicine is.
Yeah.
Ooh, I feel like
that.
Beyonce.
My kids like to play that too. Although they think it should involve money. I'm like, this doesn't always involve money.
We always did quarters.
And there's a sequence, there's a child's version too, that's either numbers or letters or things
Okay.
like
No,
that.
They probably would like that. I'm trying
He's
to.
like, this is gonna be your senior talk. This is
It's
right
hard to
here.
find one that they overall enjoy.
It's like so
Why?
complicated.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Ugh.
more important than
He's like,
Are you gonna make
this
me
is
yell?
He's like, this.
Yeah,
is
yell.
your
You don't
senior
need
talk.
that.
Either that or you can just
Easily
put it
gonna
up
be a
for
paper
your-
too. I'm like, why do you do that? You know how it is.
Might be one that's in a direction.
How's that? Can you hear better that way?
You really can't
Yeah,
be very
it's-
diplomatic with him either.
You
Like,
can.
it's just his
You can.
way of the house.
Give him one
So
more minute.
Smart. Like the funny
What are we supposed to do with these?
chemo transplant.
Give them back to me.
Oh.
And she's
There you
like,
go.
she's like, man, they're like so honest and like they're just so.
how we got, we like to survey everything.
No, yeah.
We know how to do it better than I.
Just like know exactly what the whole plan is, or what the point is, or what needs to be done, or what kind of research is. But like,
So I heard you're coming to Town and Country though when I'm on maternity leave. Oh, I don't know.
like you should.
Between you and Patty, you're helping Dr. Mahan.
Oh, I don't know.
You need to. Good.
Okay, I don't know
I was gonna say if you wanted to
where
come out there, I could
anybody
kinda run
else
through the
is,
patients with you.
but I started thinking about this several years ago. Just because the technology is there, it's all over the place. It's quite pervasive, and there's actually a dedicated group of mostly engineers who are, using the technology, the electronics, digital, robotics, in service of geriatrics. There's an international society that I wanted to go to because the meeting was in Nice in September, but I couldn't go. Anyway, so here is my update on gerontology and technology, especially in aging societies where there's becoming a shortage of both paid and unpaid caregivers. This makes sense. Wow. Is it still alive?
Yeah.
Maybe I better just hold on to it. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, we've seen inklings of it mostly around here, on 9 North in the hospital, where there's some, the cameras. Okay, that is so backwards. That is so 1960s. That is so not where the technology is. This is not going to stay on my belt. So, I have no conflicts of interest. I am not a shareholder in any technology startup. So, let's look at some of the technologies as they apply to caring for the aging population and summarize our state of knowledge about the effectiveness of some of these interventions, some of this technology, how acceptable it is to people, explore applications to promote aging in place or to a lesser extent in long-term care, and identify sources of new knowledge on this growing industry. Because last week we had a speaker, remember, who was demonstrating his technology. So what problems in aging can have technological solutions? Falls, we had our speaker last week talk about technological innovations for fall prevention. Doing ADLs, doing IADLs, chronic disease management, accessibility to medical care, which is it, whose immobility are we addressing? The medical providers or the patient? Okay, is access a matter of handicap accessibility or adverse geography, or choices that are made in allocation of resources and options for socialization for people who may be socially isolated? So if people are living alone at home, they need to do their ADLs and they need to do their IADLs. If they can't do any of those, a person has to come and help them with it. So let's start out with ambulation. So my first question is, why do we walk? 3.5 million years ago, going up to about the 2 million year horizon, there were about 10, I like to pimp the medical students with this. Okay, so if we look at how we walk, how do the other bipeds walk? Can anybody tell me? Can you think of another biped? Dead silence. Are you even sure what I'm talking about?
Monkey. Monkey.
They do not walk on two legs.
They can't.
They can if they have to, but that's not really how they get around. All right? In the somewhere between the 3.4 and 2 million years ago time horizon, there were probably around 10 bipedal hominid species. And that happened for a reason that we can all empathize with. The climate changed and the forest shrank, which left all of these monkeys standing out there in the grass. And being a little monkey on 4 legs out there in the grass, you're somebody's lunch. You're not going to last very long. So as tree climbers, they did have the capacity to stand up for short periods of time, just like monkeys and apes do now. But that's not how they get around. But about 10 different species of bipeds evolved in order to get primates out into the grassland. Now, there are quadrupedal monkeys out there, baboons, but they're about the only ones. Okay? So it let tree climbers expand into a new ecological niche. Okay? Walking on 2 legs allowed them to cover long distances at little metabolic cost. So that, as you know, if you're just walking along, you are not going to lose any weight. Okay? It is not a way to burn calories. It's extremely efficient. Okay? The other thing is, if you're a little monkey and you stand up, you have 360 vision, because you can turn your head around. You can see what's coming. buffaloes and zebras and elephants do it by having one eye on each side of its head. Okay? So they can see 360, but they can't see 360 with depth perception. Okay, if you're pre-adapted to living in the trees, you need good depth perception. And once you stand up and you can turn your head around, you've got very functional 360-degree vision. Secondarily, now that you're standing up, it frees up your hands to do something. So you can carry your lunch or your baby or a rock. Okay, all of which ultimately allowed your brain, your dog can't possibly have a brain the size of yours, okay, because his head sticks out in front of his body. If you migrate his foramen magnum to the vertical, you can balance a big brain on top of the spine, which your dog can't do. So you became smart because you stood up, not the other way around. Okay, so why do we walk? So the fossil evidence indicates that, 2 million years ago, our ancestors basically walked and ran the same way we did. Okay, but their technology wasn't, particularly digital. It was portable, okay? You'd have a tablet, but, it was made out of rock and there was no Wi-Fi. But they essentially walked around the same way we did. If you look at how babies walk, unless there's something wrong or you tie them up, they will walk. You can't prevent it, they will. And you can watch as they go from creepers to standing, the stance changes and their knees straighten out and their feet go from this way to this way. Okay, so this is the mechanics of how we walk, and if you look at it, you can see really how tenuous it is, because there are points in the gait where you're standing on a very tiny, where's my pointer? Do I have a pointer? Is this a pointer?
On the top.
On the top? Here. There are times in a normal walk where your base of support really isn't any bigger than the palm of your hand. Okay, and the muscles that are involved are mostly these little ones. So these are here, but they don't do very much for walking. It's these little muscles. There's a lot of fine motor control that's needed around the ankle for you to walk, so that as people age and they develop orthopedic problems or neurological problems or sensory problems, it gets harder and harder to maintain this upright gait. These are tracings from the gadget that John had for the Falls Clinic, showing how much displacement that you have in different centers of observation. So. Okay, so that when you start having trouble with it, this is our current Paleolithic solution to the problem. It's just like the caveman, we give him a stick. Okay? This is basically pretty primitive. It gets a little more interesting when you have, basically this is a smart car without the outer shell. Okay, and in fact, if you drive around in North St. Louis, people who can't qualify for home ownership can qualify for a little scooter, and it substitutes as a major form of transportation. Just drive around, you'll see it. Okay? Which is really good because their carbon footprint is very small and they're not damaging our environment. You can pick these up for a couple $100 at a yard sale. Okay, so why do we have to walk? I'm hoping this will work. Do we have to walk? This is the commercial, don't worry. We're not so far from here. This look familiar? This look like the hospital lobby? You want to watch the whole thing, or should I move on? Whatever you want. Looks like the Galleria, doesn't it?
Isn't that local casinos?
Nurse? Let me see if I can get back to where we could watch that. Okay, so why do you have to walk? These guys have their, you know, their little motorized vehicles, and you're not too far from that. Okay, so when do they fall? Okay, they fall when they're transferring, they fall when they're reaching, they fall when they trip over something, they fall if they're tired. Can you engineer these things out of the environment? That's the question. For people who are not going to realistically be walking like your ancestors. So this is how an engineer looks at it. It's time and motion. Okay, so how are you going to get there, and how long are you going to take? Okay, so the motion is torque, momentum, inertia. What's your energy source? How much of it are you going to use? How much is it going to cost? How do you make it accessible to humans, and in this case humans who may have limitations, quality control, and obsolescence versus time to failure? That is, do you build it to last until you know that the iPhone 8 is coming out, or do you build it to last forever? Okay, this is a decision that goes into engineering these things, so that the solutions that we have for mobility fall into two big categories. One is it directly in contact with the body? In which case, is it amplifying function or substituting for function? Or is it a modification of the environment so that it fits the level of function of the person you put into it? And is it wireless, or does it have to be plugged in? Okay. Then there are remote functions, which is they are not on site. There's motion detectors, and we saw those last week. There's physiologic monitors, which are pretty much in already being used. They can be internet-based so that you can log in or log out. You can provide virtual medical care based on collecting data from remote monitoring. And it can be wireless. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone has to intentionally log in. Okay, so here's an example of a more advanced way of transferring people besides putting on a gait belt, hoisting them up with a grunt and swinging them over to the bed. Okay, here's one that's semi-automatic. Okay, so this is a semi-robotic wheelchair that will stand you up. There are modified segways for paraplegics, so they can get around not sitting in a chair but standing up. Okay, here's the problem with toilets, is they just sit there. Okay, so that how do you get them there? Again, we find that, you know, people, you put on a gait belt and you push them over there and you hoist them up, pivot them, and you drop them on the toilet. There are, you know, semi-robotic lifts that you can put people on that will pick them up, strap them in, picks them up, pushes them over, drops them on the toilet. The toilet is semi-automatic. It knows you're coming, so it opens up, and when you're done, it closes itself. And it flushes itself, and I could not get my picture to copy of the robotic toilet that comes when you call it. It sits in the corner of the hospital room, and it looks like a little purple penguin. Okay, so that when your patient needs to go to the bathroom, what do? They're confused, so they get up and they try to go to the bathroom, and then they fall on the floor. Or if they're not confused, they push the button to call the nurse, and then they get frustrated waiting. And then they get up and go to the bathroom, and they may or may not do it safely. Why put a person in the middle of this whole transaction when all you have to do is call the toilet? It comes out from the wall, his little arms spring up, okay? And all you need to do is get into the arms of the little penguin, and it holds you and turns you around. And when you're done with what you're gonna do, by then the nurse is there, and it will flush itself and go back to the wall. Okay, why would you call a nurse if you could call the toilet and have your needs satisfied with no intermediary? Okay, here's another robotic toilet. Here's a sort of semi-electric patient transferer that will go, the wheelchair goes into the front of it, and then it goes to the toilet. It takes the wheelchair away, and it leaves the patient sitting on the toilet. Here's another one where the toilet seat comes up to greet your butt and then sits you down. So there's no lugging people up and spinning them around and transferring them. So all of these things would be a way of reducing a high frequency cause of falls. So there's the other business about the bathroom. So you'll see over here is a traditional independent living apartment, okay, for your grandparents. And it's very expensive because it's in a brand new development. But the basic design of this hasn't changed since the 1800s, okay? Why is that? Like, the outhouse is in the furthest possible place from the living space. Okay. So if somebody's sitting here watching TV, they got to get up, go through this door, go down the hall, turn left, go through this door, and then deal with the actual bathroom itself, which makes no sense. I mean, I understand that, you know, to put the outhouse outside of the living space made sense when there was no indoor plumbing. Okay, but we have indoor plumbing. That makes no sense. So the Germans have designed these independent and assisted living residential towers for the elderly, where they put the bathroom in the place where it's the closest to any place or any function that the domicile will have. No matter where you are, you're the same distance from the bathroom. Furthermore, you don't have to deal with, you know, corridors and lighting and all of that business to know how you're going to get there, because it has this semicircular sheath, which, if you want privacy, you push the button, it closes. If you're done, you push the button, it opens. How difficult would that be? Here, all the plumbing hookups are out here and here. The plumbing hookups are right in the middle. Now, the kitchen can also be incorporated as a pod within this central service area. And furthermore, it allows for lots of light and lots of windows. Okay, so here's a close-up of the little function pod here. Okay, so there's a toilet, there's a shower, and we have sinks here. I've also seen drawings where they managed to incorporate the kitchen plumbing into this, just to make it a little bit easier to design. And this way, nobody, you know, if somebody is rickety on their feet, they never have to walk a long way to get to the bathroom, because it's equidistant from any place that they may be in the apartment. I showed this to the hospital architects, and it was like, I never thought of that, because they're still thinking about the outhouse. Okay, another way to improve mobility is exoskeletons, which initially they're developing them for the Army, essentially. So they've got these exoskeletons that you strap on for, you know, various sorts of infantry. What they do essentially is amplify strength. I'm not sure how well they would adapt to geriatrics, because even with lightweight materials, they're kind of difficult to move around. So robotic toilets is one step. The next step is to actually have little autonomous beings, okay, to make up for the caregivers who may not be there. So there are assistive robots, okay, that is, they're hands-on to do the task. This is all the jargon that comes out of germ technology. There's SIR, which is socially interactive robots that socialize but don't actually perform tasks. And then there's the socially assistive robots that do both. John isn't here, but he published one of the studies about the baby seal socially interactive robots. So they're very realistic looking stuffed animals, but they're robots. So they wriggle around and they make baby seal noises. And at least in small trials, people really like them. I'm not sure how I feel about that, especially because they cost about $1,200 a piece. And the residents that they used were organized in a discussion group, and so they sat and they talked about their baby seals, and they liked it a lot better than the live dog. I'm not sure how long that novelty effect would last. Okay, but I think we did one trial on them here. Okay, but robots are clearly a way to expand the workforce. Okay, and here's a socially assistive dog. You can get one, this is the expensive one, but you can get one at Walmart for like $29. That does all the same things. This one is full size, and it will talk to you, and it will, if you look at the little hands here, it can assist with transfers, it can fetch things. But the people who study these, one of the interesting things that they found is that you can make them look very real, very human. And it just gives people the creeps. They don't want them.
And that one looks like a stormtrooper from Star Wars, I think.
Yeah, there's another one I'll show you that looks like Hello Kitty. Okay. No, but when they made very realistic ones, which, you know, the animatronics people at Disneyland have been doing for years, Disney World. If you put those very realistic robots in somebody's house, it just scares the hell out of them. They know, no matter how realistic it is, they know it isn't. And they get a very aversive reaction to them. But if they look like toys, that's okay. So here's like a little service module robot. It's got a little head on it. It has a screen, a touch screen that people can use to talk to it. It's got a goodie bag. You can get candy, and it runs around in the nursing home and gets a certain amount of attention. It isn't doing anything particularly interesting. Okay. Here's another one that does more or less the same thing. This is the baby seal. And it seems to have stimulated more conversation among the residents, which in and of itself is a good thing. All right, okay, so that's, there's a video that wasn't here. No. Let me see. That one's not playing. Sorry. Oh, here it is. Nope. There's the reference, not the video. But it's the Hello Kitty video, the Hello Kitty robot that they use as a nursing assistant in Japanese nursing homes. They're already using them. They look like Hello Kitty, and they.
There's no legs or arms.
It has little flipper arms. Okay, and it can pick people up, transfer them from different levels. It can actually do a bath. I don't know how thoroughly it does that, but it will do a bath, and it can pick people up from the tatami on the floor and put them up on a bed, and it can move them around like that. Okay, so telehealth is not something of the future. It's already here. It's very well developed at Mercy. They have a system of telehealth management of ICU patients in small town hospitals where they don't have the volume or the money to pay for intensivist physicians. They have them on the TV managing, half a dozen or so per screen ICUs. So the current technology for telehealth is EHR. I forgot what HIE was. Doesn't matter. Websites, HIPAA-compliant email, single-purpose monitoring devices. Like we put the loop recorders. They transmit directly to the EPS lab. They don't have to plug them in or anything. But you can monitor weight with actigraphs, activity levels, pulse, blood pressure, weight, glucose, INRs, O2, all remotely. You don't have to have a health professional there, but this can all be transmitted either by manually entering them into an EHR or a secure website or secure phone, or it can go wirelessly. Okay. Another form of monitoring is not necessarily the wearable technology, because like runners, bicycle racers, most professional athletes are now using this soft wearable monitoring technology. They know their heart rate, they know their oxygen pulse ox, and other things that they can measure remotely. All right, so it's just a matter of repurposing it for watching frail old people in their house. The other way to do it is deploying boxes that don't have any connectivity, so that they're either receiving the information passively and somebody has to go get it to do it, but that isn't, that's old tech now. So the market drivers for this stuff is patient-centered medical homes that need access in order to satisfy accountability measures. Okay. Chronic disease monitoring. I didn't have a chance to read it, but I just saw a study of using this remote monitoring to manage heart failure patients at home. Collecting health indicators for the purposes of quality improvement and risk management for the organization. Satisfying meaningful use requirements. Entrepreneurial forces, like our speaker last week. I got all of this from a video of online podcast from a company that markets these things. So synonyms for telehealth are distance medicine. It's used for video conferencing, whether the video conference is educational or, for example, Cited isn't doing it, but there's several of the cancer centers. I think MD Anderson does remote tumor board for small hospitals or small oncology practices that don't have the spread. So instead of doing like our Monday morning breast cancer conferences over in the cancer center, they'll just do a regional one, which is run out of MD Anderson's in Houston in Texas, and it'll be run out of there. And a number of the small hospitals in Missouri are plugged into that. Okay. Remote monitoring is telehealth. Telemedicine, where you have your visit on a video device. Kaiser Permanente does this. And they have self-directed servicing where there's a kiosk or a website where people go in and record what they need, and then they get a response either from an algorithm or from a healthcare provider. Northwestern is starting to have kiosks in the lobby for various sorts of, let people self-select for, lower intensity urgent care needs and keep them out of the emergency room. But the systems need something besides the box. Once you put all of this distance monitoring in, who's watching? It's like the cameras on 9 North. Everybody's got a camera pointed at them, but nobody's watching, so they still fall on the floor. So if you're going to be doing this remote monitoring, you've got to invest in people who are watching. Mercy has built an entire building for this that's full of ICU nurses wearing scrubs so that they stay in character. I mean, they could be wearing anything, but they have them wear scrubs. Okay, is there any connectivity so that if you have somebody who's being monitored for heart failure and they're also being monitored for activity levels or falls, do these boxes talk to each other? Okay, or do you have different suppliers monitoring different things, and you now have an electronic replication of a health system where there's no crosstalk and no integration. So they all have to go into each other. So there's small contractors and there's big systems, and these things are already operating on different scale. So it comes down to who pays for it. That's because the nurse who's monitoring the ICU patients in a small hospital 600 miles away, or it could be a nurse in Singapore monitoring patients who are on another continent. It doesn't matter. Okay? Who's paying for it and who's regulating it? So I'm always having to Jeff, I'm always having to fill out these face-to-face, assessments of the patient to verify that I really know the patient. Can I get paid for talking to Jeff on my cell phone while he's at Mr. Murray's house? Do I get paid for that? Okay, so we have the home care. You can get, there is a way you can get paid, the physician can get paid for supervising it. But telemedicine is really encounter-based medicine. And so can you get paid? Well, in some states you can, and in Missouri you can't. But the other thing is, what about if the person who's monitoring all the boxes is in Utah and your patient is in Nebraska? Can somebody who's licensed in Utah provide service to a patient in Nebraska where they don't have a license? This hasn't totally been worked out, okay, but you have to have cross-state licensing. We already know how this works. This is how the VA does it. This is how the VA has done it for decades. If you are licensed as a health professional practitioner in the VA in Austin, Texas, you can go to Marion, Illinois, or Perry Point, Maryland, and you're a VA doc or a VA nurse. They handle that, so that we have ways to do it. And the other one is malpractice, and that, of course, as everybody who hates the government knows, it's regulated by the states, which is as it should be. So every state is totally different. There's no way to manage this in any organized fashion. So this is how. That's not right. Come on. I have a really nice video here if it would work. No, it won't go. It's a video of virtual nursing home rounds where the nurse has one of those little, computers on wheels, but she has it at the nursing home. The physician is, who knows where the physician is, in his office or someplace else. But it's got two-way Skyping, which my friend's 3-year-old toddler knows how it works. She can FaceTime grandma in Chile. She knows how to do it. Why can't, in a nursing home, can't we figure out how to get, a 12-inch screen on somebody's tablet or laptop, open it up, Skype the doctor, it's two-way. You have the additional equipment where you can put the stethoscope all over the patient and it transmits into the speakers in the doctor's office. You can hear the murmur, he can hear the rowels, he can hear the wheezes. And the nurse, can perform and customize the exam to what you need to interact with the doctor, and you have an actual contact visit. So It also makes it easier because the family, the one that I have here, the daughter is also at the visit. And so you have a chance, especially in the nursing home, where the family can interact with the doctor. All they have to do is FaceTime on their phone if they're not there, or be there at the time. Okay, so remote monitoring technology. There are the home surveillance videos. You can have a home networked motion detectors. I mean, I have these, looking for burglars, but I had to, disconnect them because every time the dog ran down the hall during the night, the lights would start flashing. But it depends on how you want to set the alerts. This is what they have at Tiger Place. You can have audio fall detectors, just like people have for their kids. There's no reason why you can't set them up in grandma's room. Okay. There's the soft cardio garments that the bicycle racers wear. You can have docked single-use devices, like things that will take your blood pressure or your glucose. There's the gyro accelerometers. The limitations are who's monitoring it. So either it's centralized or the family may be doing it. I have a patient who hot-wired mom's entire house. He's a security specialist. Okay, she can't do anything without him knowing it. She agrees to this. Okay, but much of the time with the centralized monitoring, it's going to be after the fact and not necessarily preventative. They have to be set to sensitivity standard. Okay, the same amount of gait instability means different things in different people. It does provide peace of mind. It's more a matter of the so-called right to privacy than HIPAA, because if it's not being operated by a health care organization, doesn't have to be HIPAA compliant. But if it is, then it has to be HIPAA compliant. So the provider has to have both liability and compliance. And we don't really know exactly what the relationship is between the data collection for monitoring and the patient outcome. There are studies coming out. Okay, this is Tiger Place, where they have like the Connect that the guy had last week, where you can't identify a person specifically, but you can tell there's a human figure moving around. And if it should be moving around, but it isn't moving around, that's an alarm. Can I make this one run? I can't make the video run. But this is the result of a meta-analysis of studies of telemedicine for monitoring heart failure patients at home. And compared to usual care, what I get out of looking at this is mostly a bunch of small studies, and everybody's confidence intervals overlap. So is this a remarkable improvement? No, but like right now I got a patient who won't get out of his farmhouse, and the mailbox is 100 yards away, and he can't walk that far, and so he's driving to the mailbox. And I think he's going to get lost. And, Dad doesn't want to leave the house, and the daughters don't want to pull him out of the house. And the daughter's an occupational therapist at the VA who does driving evaluations, and it isn't like they don't know what's going on. But for a guy like him, if he had a chronic illness or something like that, if you had remote monitoring, maybe you can anticipate problems or at least catch them sooner than you might otherwise. He is 5 miles from the next nearest house, and so there's no way to safely monitor him except telehealth or bite the bullet and, you know, take them to the assisted living. So in terms of mortality, the evidence is underwhelming. But we don't know exactly how they selected the patients in these studies. There's a lot of heterogeneity. They're small. So this is another one, the mortality in each randomized group between either usual care or telephone monitoring live time with the home nurse or the, you know, calling people up and obtaining the data from them, okay, or telemonitoring. So the dashed line is usual care. The dotted line is with augmented nursing support, and the solid line is telemonitoring. Telemonitoring and augmented, you know, telehealth monitoring by the nurse are no different. And it was better than usual health by about 15 or so percent. That's clinically significant, you know, and the outcome here is indisputable. It's mortality. So you can't, you know, dispute the endpoint. It's easy to measure. Okay, then there's the whole systems demonstration. This is really complicated, really expensive. There are 2 of them, and they were done in Canada. And the essential, they looked at 2 things. One was quality of life and psychological well-being over 12 months, comparing telehealth versus usual care. And the other one was cost effectiveness in terms of chronic diseases. So in terms of peace of mind, quality of life, there was no difference. Okay, the longevity measured in terms of qualities, okay? Qualities. Also, no difference, but the telehealth was more expensive than usual care. Whereas a lot of the rationale is that it's supposed to be cheaper. Okay. These are survival curves from the whole systems trial. There's a little bit of difference, but I mean, not much. Nothing to write home about. Okay, so here's another one using Medicare data. It's a randomized clinical trial of the Health Buddy self-report device, which is giving people a little box where they put in their blood pressure and their AccuChecks and all of that stuff. There's 4 buttons. So they found giving people a one-way communication, reporting their health data. No significant difference in outcomes for COPD and diabetes in those patients who scored on a questionnaire as not engaged in their health. Okay, but for heart failure patients who were scoring engaged on monitoring their health, they did have a significant improvement. So the issue seems less to be the technology, but the amount of psychological engagement that the patient has in self-care. Okay. So, in terms of putting in all of this remote monitoring, one way or another, this is what the healthcare system, the medical managers, the hospital systems, the insurers, what they're looking at is professional liability. How do you get people licensed in 50 states? Is this going to save me money? Is it ethical? Is it HIPAA compliant? Do we have to train people any different? And do we get paid more, less, or the same. These things have not been worked out. Okay, the stakeholders are fairly broad. So there's the National Medical Quality Assurance group is very engaged in this. The International Environmental Engineering Association. These are the guys who like come up with the idea that maybe the bathroom shouldn't be in the backyard. Maybe it should be someplace where you can find it. These are the guys who do the domotics, where they change environments to make them accessible to old people. EDRA, which is another group of engineers. Integrated health systems like Kaiser Permanente are looking at this real seriously. The professional societies, the Geron Technology group is a subset of the International IAGG, Association for Geriatrics and Gerontology. So it's a subgroup of that international group. And there's, you know, lots of entrepreneurs like the guy we saw last week. National health systems in aging countries, in EU particularly, most of the studies are either coming out of Netherlands or Germany, and they're coming out of Japan and Korea, and the VA and CMS are very interested in these kinds of studies. There haven't been any large-scale ones in this country. But patients and families are very keen on this when you talk to them about it, except for having the creepy robot. A lot of this seems like a good idea to them. Okay, so these are my sources. These are all journals that you can get to on Medline. I'm sorry all my movies didn't play, but I can find someone. Try and read them.
So you said that that is more expensive than usual care in that study, but the argument will be that it decreases readmission and decreases ED visit. That's debatable, or is it true that really safe?
It has not been demonstrated on a large scale. Okay, but there's two sides to that, which is, first of all, the really big trials were not in the US. They were in places that have single-payer health systems, which changes things. The other thing is that they're all essentially prototypes. They don't have anything to compare them with. And then there's also the economy of scale, which is if you have to build a remote monitoring network now, you're going to have to do it from scratch. What would the cost be if going into the future, if you're going to be building independent living and assisted living, if all of these domotics were already just part of, you know, standard construction? So there's economy of scale. If anything, instead of having little entrepreneurs building this stuff, you have General Electric, Apple. You know, suddenly there's an economy of scale, and so the cost benefit could change very radically, very suddenly. Either that, or we can all go live in a giant space station where we are weightless and nobody ever falls. Okay. Thank you.
They were never able to feed them. They did it, you did it as long as they didn't find it. Still.
I'm well. Thank you. Hey man, we got it.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we got it.
And they're
Give me a
not.
letter. It has perfected where it is, but where it is.
Let's go find out.
From who?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll see you later.
You didn't go?
Double click. What if
Carla says that the nurse said that he had mentioned. Because on the admission order, because I did those, and then there's one other new patient coming too. So,
I had a note on that.
he was like, I'm not saying the way you're bad. But he was one of them.
Yeah, this is the video of the,
That was.
Well, you're not in a slideshow right now either. But, if you want to copy that down on my drive,
Was it
I can play with it. Or send it to me.
someone
Or
else?
you wear.
No.
Email it
Okay.
to me.
There's someone else that's
Email
from
it?
St. Mary's that they were trying to give us, but he's been there before, and Hawk had him, and I'm like, well, Hawk should have him again, even though
is
he's
this gonna
St. Mary's.
answer?
Doesn't make any
Thank
sense.
you.
They did say there was maybe one more coming back, so
Oh, that-
they didn't call that one in.
Change it.
General failure. I'll do it
He has a full
Okay,
note.
yeah,
time.
like, I'm not gonna be, I'm gonna take off tomorrow, so, but yeah, I'll be happy.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, 'cause they.
And on
that
no
they
other
did get-
meds.
They did get plenty of
Recording here.
Everything, except for the full max. But then, like, he has the Foley, so why
Mr.
am I
Murray.
not here?
It's create